By 1984, Colleen Stan appeared to be living a very active, completely average life. She held a public-facing job as a maid at a local hotel. She went out for daily jogs, and she even made regular trips to visit her relatives. But for 22 hours out of every single day, she was living out a nightmare. After finishing her hotel shift, she would return to a suburban home and crawl underneath a couple's waterbed, where she was locked inside a wooden box the size of a coffin. This creates a deeply unsettling paradox. She had the physical freedom to walk away at almost any time. She had access to public streets, hotel telephones, and her own family. Yet day after day, she actively chose to return to that box. Cameron Hooker relied on the fact that psychological boundaries are often more durable than physical ones. He spent years trapping Colleen's mind, ensuring that even when the doors were open, she believed staying inside was her only safe option. 7 years earlier, in 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan was living a quiet life in Eugene, Oregon. She wanted to attend a friend's birthday party hundreds of miles away in California, but she didn't have a car. So she did something that was considered entirely normal in the 1970s. She packed a bag and started hitchhiking. Eventually, a young married couple named Cameron and Janice pulled up and offered her a ride. They seemed perfectly safe. They were polite, and they even had their baby in the car with them. Colleen got inside. Somewhere along the highway, the atmosphere snapped. Cameron suddenly veered off the road, climbed into the back seat, and drew a knife on Colleen. He tied her up and forced a dark, heavy wooden box directly over her head. Blinded and terrified, Colleen was driven to the couple's home in Red Bluff, California. Cameron dragged her down into the basement, where he subjected her to constant torture and confined her to a restrictive crate. Cameron had successfully captured her physical body, but he knew that to keep her from fighting back in the long term, he would have to secure her mind as well. To achieve total compliance, Cameron engineered a complex fabrication. He told Colleen about a ruthless, omnipotent underground slave syndicate that he called the Company. If she ever tried to run away, the Company would immediately hunt down her family. This threat was reinforced by his wife, Janice, who corroborated the lie, claiming she was a former slave severely punished for trying to escape. Hearing this from the only other woman in the house broke Colleen's spirit. Believing her family's lives were on the line, she eventually signed a slave contract, officially pledging her soul to Cameron. This is the core principle of coercive control. When a lie is aggressively enforced by the only two people in a victim's isolated reality, it transforms into an impenetrable psychological wall. With that wall firmly in place, the dynamic in the house began to shift. Over the next 5 years, from 1979 to 1984, Cameron began trading physical restraints for psychological ones. He allowed Colleen out of her box for hours at a time to perform domestic duties. She cooked the family meals, cleaned the house, and served as a babysitter. Eventually, he pushed these boundaries to the extreme. He allowed Colleen to go jogging by herself and even get a job as a maid at a hotel. He even took her to Riverside to visit her family, posing as her boyfriend. She had dozens of opportunities to scream for help, but terrified of retaliation, she remained silent. She even dutifully handed her hotel paychecks directly over to Cameron every week. Buoyed by his absolute control, Cameron's megalomania escalated. He began digging a cinder-block pit underneath a storage shed in his backyard. His plan was to move Colleen's box into the pit and kidnap an army of new captives to keep there. Cameron's confidence in his control led him to take risks that would ultimately destroy his operation. The prospect of filling their home with multiple kidnapped women was the breaking point for Janice. She reached a limit on how much of Cameron's depravity she was willing to tolerate. Crushed by guilt, Janice suddenly shifted her allegiance. She started treating Colleen with kindness, taking her to church and attempting to bond with her. Desperate for guidance, Janice set up a secret meeting with her pastor. After hearing the story, he commanded her to leave her husband and help Colleen escape. Janice followed through. She drove straight to the hotel where Colleen was working her shift, pulled her aside, and finally confessed everything. She told Colleen that the Company never existed. There was no underground syndicate, and there was no one coming to hurt her family. Without the Company to sustain the fear, the entire framework of her captivity dissolved. Her 7-year imprisonment had relied on a shared delusion. Once the truth was spoken, the walls effectively vanished. Free from the lie, Colleen didn't hesitate. She immediately caught a bus and successfully fled back to her family in Riverside. Janice waited 3 full months before going to the police. She harbored a hope that she could rehabilitate Cameron herself, only reporting him when she began to fear he might target their own daughters. Police arrested Cameron Hooker. At trial, he was found guilty and received a 104-year prison sentence. Janice secured a plea deal. In exchange for testifying against him, she received 0 prison time. Colleen Stan's ordeal remains a stark case study in the mechanics of coercive control. It shows how isolation can be used to enforce a terrifying lie, eventually turning a victim's own fear into the primary barrier to their freedom.